Hey there crafty friends, it's Juliana Michaels and welcome back to my channel. Today I've got something wickedly fun to share. 24 new colors of Mini Distress Oxide ink pads are now available from Tim Holtz and Ranger Ink, and they're just in time for spooky season. Or any time really. These little pads may be mini, but they pack a mighty punch. I'll show you how I use them to create 3 hauntingly fun Halloween tags. In this video, I'm reusing the same simple techniques from my Christmas Mini Distress Oxide project. Only this time, I'm giving them a spooky spin with new colors and Halloween-inspired designs. It just goes to show how easy it is to carry your favorite ideas across seasons with a simple color and theme swap. And while I'm focusing on tags today, keep in mind you can also turn them into cards, add them into junk journals, or send them off as a little Halloween treat for friends and family. Now grab your minis and let's get inky with a Halloween twist. So Tim Holtz and Ranger have made us all happy by continuing to add to the Distress Oxide Mini collection. So they just released 24 new colors, and I'm pretty sure, because we've got this many, that we're going to have one more release that will get us the full palette. So if you like to collect all the things, that should make you happy. If you're a Distress Oxide lover, you should be super happy about having these as well. If you're new to Distress Oxide, the minis are a perfect way to dip your toe into Distress Oxide inks. And you know, if you like to travel and craft and go to crops and stuff, like these are perfect for that. There's also some like techniques that you can do with these little ink pads that you can't do with others. And while I'm not necessarily covering new techniques in this video, I'm kind of resharing similar techniques that I did in a previous video. So what I've done this time is I've switched up from Christmas and I'm doing some Halloween themed projects using those same techniques. So if Halloween's not your thing, obviously you can still follow along with the techniques I'm sharing here and use any kind of stamps that you have. If you prefer Christmas, you can also go back to the Christmas video and check that one out if you haven't already. So I'll have that link down below. And yeah, so let's get into it here. So I'm going to be working with a variety of the mixed media stamps and stencil sets. Most of what I've got here are Halloween themed, but you might notice this one is Christmas, and this is Mixed Media Set 155, and I loved the technique that I did with this for the Christmas examples, and I was just thinking of ideas of what I wanted to do for this video, and I thought, oh my goodness, it would be kind of cool to try using the same stamp set with Halloween colors and make a Halloween card. So that is one of the sets I'll be working with. And then the rest of them here are Halloween themed. So I've got MM 172, 171, 148, and 197. And these are all resized images from the original stamp set. So some of these are images that were just on one set. Some of these are like images that are combined from multiple sets. So you may have some of these images in your stash already. They'll just be a different size than what's in these sets. But what I like about these is that it comes with the stamps, and then there's also a stencil in here with 2 designs on it. And I think, again, this is a great way for someone that's kind of new to stamping and stenciling, or Tim Holtz or Distress. It's an easy way for them to kind of get into some of these techniques and products without as much investment as buying like a full stamp set and the larger stencils and that. And then the other sets I'm using are just for the sentiment. So I've got Tiny Text Halloween and then Tiny Frights. So obviously any sentiment stamp sets would work that you have, so you don't necessarily need these, and you don't necessarily need any of these either. So feel free to pull from your stash and play along. So the Distress Oxide colors that I'm going to be working with from this new color release are dusty concord, hickory smoke, old paper, dried marigold, twisted citron, gathered twigs, and frayed burlap. And because we're doing Halloween, I also brought in black soot, which was from the previous color releases. And then the paper I'm going to be working on are these number 8 size tags that are from the Mixed Media Heavy stock. So you could also just create your own tags to work with. I would just recommend some sort of paper that can handle water, because you are going to need your distress sprayer, because we're going to be doing some spraying of the inks. So these are going to get a little bit wet. So the paper needs to be able to handle that. Now let's get into the making. So for this first tag or card, you could certainly cut this down and just trim off the top if you wanted to work on a tag base, or you could do what I'm going to be doing here on on a regular size card. So I'm going to be working with this Christmas set. This is Mixed Media 155. So these are stamp and stencil sets that come together, and I think they're a great value for what they are. And you might be wondering, why am I using a Christmas stamp for a Halloween tag or card? And well, I just kind of had this idea and I thought I would give it a go, and I loved how it turned out. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the stamp here and I'm going to ink it up with some of the new Mini Distress Oxide inks. And this image here is kind of like almost looks like a poinsettia or something. It's got little berries, and just going to tap on the twisted citron to the berry areas. And this is what's great about these smaller ink pads, is you can kind of take the corner of them and tap it on and color in the stamp and kind of put ink where you want it. Now I'm adding a little bit of the black soot, and while this color is from a previous release of colors, I couldn't do a Halloween project without some black. So that's why I added that one in here. And now I'm just going to lightly mist this with some water. So you want to hold the sprayer pretty far back away, and so the bottle won't be even in the camera. And I'm just going to lightly mist that with just a little bit of water, and then stamp that here onto my background. And then you see you kind of get that little bit of a watery effect, and there's quite a bit of ink still left, so you can mist that again. And you can probably get a couple stamped images off of that one inking, depending on how light you want it to be. So I'm just going to kind of dry that off and then repeat that process here of inking up the little berries. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can kind of, if you get some ink in some places that maybe you don't want it, it's not a big deal. And you're not going to contaminate your ink pads and destroy them or ruin them or anything if you get a little bit of ink on them. I'll show you here in a second what you can do to fix that. So I'm just going to spray that off camera now, since you've seen me do that, and stamp again here with what we've got left. And you don't necessarily have to dry it off in between, but you can. And so if your ink pad's getting a little bit of color on it from like what's left on the stamp, or across, when you're stamping it in here and it's getting on the ink, you can just tap that off onto your block until it gets clear, or dab it off with a paper towel until it clears up that color and removes it, and then yeah, you're good to go. So just gonna repeat one more time. I think will be good enough here. Give it a little spritz, and we'll do a little one down there, and then one more up here maybe. There we go. Yeah. All right. So I have noticed the black does tend to stain these clear stamps, but it's all good. Not super worried about that. So Now we're going to take this one, and for this one I'm going to add some hickory smoke. This and the Twisted Citron are in this new release of colors. So if you're curious about that or not, each release they're doing is adding another set of 24 colors, I believe. So I think we've got, after this one, I think there's maybe one more release to get all of them. So yeah, so that'll be nice if you're wanting to add to and have like the full collection. Here we go. That looks pretty good. Let's see if there's anything left on there. No. All right. And now we're going to do one more here. This one is just this little berry branch. Of course, you could use any of these stamps. And like if you don't have this small stamp set of these, but you have the original large set, you could do this same technique. Or maybe you've got some other kind of similar type stamps that are kind of like this silhouette of some greenery. And you could do this same technique with those. So just kind of repeating this process over and over here. And just kind of adding color. And I like how the off stamp, like the second time you stamp it where you get that lighter impression, kind of helps it add a little bit of depth and interest to the design, I feel like. Don't really like that there, but it's all good. Let's see. Sometimes you can get lucky and kind of tone it down. Oh, there we go. Just a little bit of water. We're going to add some more stuff to the background there, so that's not the end of the world. We can kind of cover it up as we go here. Let's get one more little stamp here. And let's just do that to kind of hide it a little bit. There we go. That's perfect. Okay, that will do. All right, and so now we're going to take the stencil. So now we're going to take the stencil that comes with this and add some more interest to this. I really feel like the stencils that they selected to go with these are, so it's 2 patterns on 1 stencil, which you might be like, what the heck, how am I supposed to use that? Well, they have selected designs that are easily repeatable for these, so you can shift the stencil down and expand it across whatever surface you're working on. So now we're going to take the dried marigold and get a little blending brush here, and we're just going to apply that through the stencil here, specifically trying to get it into like these areas that don't have any of the stamping. But if you get it, or if you want to put it everywhere else, you can. It's not going to hurt anything. And then the thing about the oxides is because they have a pigment base, they will kind of layer over what's below them a little bit. So you can kind of peel that up and see what you got. And then to get down the rest of the tag here, down here. So all you have to do is shift that down, line it up with the previous section that you've already inked, and then just continue on. And you might notice I put a little piece of that mint tape here. That is just kind of to mask off the other pattern that's on this stencil so that I don't accidentally just get carried away and put some ink down there where I don't want it and get that other pattern. So let's scoot it down just one more little bit here and just get a few more spots kind of peeking through the bottom here. There. And if you wanted to stop at this point, you certainly could. And in fact, you know, I think I might on this one. But there's also this other pattern on here that if you wanted to, you could position this and add another layer of a texture onto this and just make it even more layered and interesting. And if I was going to do that, the sample one that I made here, I did the little cross pattern here, whatever you want to call it, with the old paper distress ink. So a couple options there for you. Now obviously the stamp set comes with some Christmas sentiments, which obviously we're not doing Christmas, we're doing some Halloween. So I pulled out my Tiny Text Halloween stamp set, and always a favorite of mine is the Double Double Toil and Trouble. And I'm going to apply some hickory smoke to the stamp, and I'm not going to use a stamping block this time. I'm just going to kind of randomly stamp and push this down, and then I can kind of get little sections of the stamp that I want here and there, just kind of to add a little bit more of a organic feel to things. And then I'm just stamping off the ink that's on there until it's pretty much gone. So some of it will be really nice and detailed, and then some of it will be, you know, less crisp. Now, if you wanted to spritz this, you could. I just find that when they get this tiny with the stamp images, like a text type thing, like that's this small, when you spritz that, it just runs too much and you really lose a lot of the definition. And I feel like on this, especially with it being words, that you might want to be able to read it just a little bit, just to make it more interesting. And then you can obviously tell that it's Halloween themed. So there we are. And then the final step for this then would be, if you want to just maybe ink the edges a little bit with some ink. I always like to do this. So you could, got a little bit of hickory smoke here. And this will just give it a little bit more of a distressed effect. But like if you don't want that, if you like it a little bit more neat and clean, you can certainly do it how, you know, with or without the edge, inking on the edges. And if you wanted to, you know, a little bit more distress of any kind, you could also spritz this with a little bit of water to just kind of activate things and make the ink run a little bit more. You know, that's kind of really up to you. And then the only other thing to do here is, you know, if you wanted to add like a little bit of a sentiment in the center there, you could. If you, like I said earlier, if you wanted to trim that top off and use that as a card, and just put that on a card front, and you're done. Or you could use it as a tag for like a gift bag or treat bag or something. So just some options for you there. For this next tag, I'm going to be working with Mixed Media Set 148, and as you can see, this one definitely has a Halloween theme. And I'm going to be using this large skull image, and because I'm using kind of a bigger image, sometimes I like to work with my stamping platform, because if I need to restamp it, because like maybe I didn't get enough pressure, especially with it being a bigger image, I can restamp it if I need to. And then I'm also pulling out the sentiment that I'm going to be using on this card, and this is from the Tiny Frights stamp set, but you could use any sentiment that you like. And I'm just really using this just to kind of help me with placement and getting it centered here on my card, so I just kind of have enough space and all there. So once I get everything lined up, And I'm just going to ink up my skull here with a little black soot. Yes, again, I pulled in the black soot because, well, Halloween. But you can also use the hickory smoke, since it's just not as dark. And get a light mist. And we'll stamp that here onto our paper. And if you want that to be more runny, you could mist it again and stamp again. Like that'll just kind of help oxidize that ink a little bit more. If you want it even more, do it again. It's really kind of up to you. I don't mind this image, especially since it's kind of like the focal point, to be a little bit more crisp than some of the other stamping that we're going to be doing. And now, from here, you know, if you want to keep stamping in your stamping platform, you can. I just find working with the stamping blocks to be a little bit, I don't know, easier sometimes when it comes to doing this sort of stamping. And I'm going to be doing one of my kind of favorites. I love doing a kind of collage type stamping. So we're just going to add some stamping to the background here. Now I went ahead and stamped and kind of cut out my sentiment just to give me a little bit of an idea of maybe where I want to stamp some of the images that I'm going to be stamping here, just to kind of create my design. I don't want to cover up everything that I'm stamping. So, all right, so we're going to ink that one up, give it a little spritz off camera, just lightly misting it. And stamp that there. Now, if you do something and you're like, that's too bold, mist it again. And because these are clear stamps, if you take your time and are careful, you can line it back up and just get a slight bit of more water on there. Now, I didn't really get very much water on the stamp, but you kind of get my drift there. And so now we'll just continue on here, adding some more of this stamping here. Now I'm got some, that first one was hickory smoke. Now I've got some twisted citron. Give that a mist. There we are. And we're going to do a little bit of that one up here. Now I didn't, obviously, as you could tell, I didn't ink up the whole stamp because I knew I wasn't going to stamp that whole image across there. And now do this little text image here with some Dusty Concord. Give that a light mist. And again, that is, with all that tiny text, you get it too wet, you are going to lose a lot of that detail. So it's kind of up to you how much of that you want to keep or not keep. I'm hardly misting these, so you could, if you want them a little bit more runny, you could add more water if you like. It's really kind of up to you. I got some dried marigold. Let's mist that one just a tiny bit there. Ink that one up again here. And add a little bit of that here. And do a little bit of it up here. Here we go. Now I want to kind of start filling in this little space here. So grab a couple of these smaller stamps, this little skull. And I'm not sure if I'm going to re-stamp him or not, so we'll leave him off there. And now I've got this little don't know if it's like kind of a prescription image. I love this one. And I'm not going to do any misting on this one. I'm just going to kind of leave it. There we go. Oh yeah, this toxic one. This is a good one. Stamp that with a little more of the twisted citron. I love that bright pop green on there. And you can kind of see like I'm kind of doing these like opposite each other and adding like, you know, just bits of color here. Like I feel like I could use like maybe just a little bit of green down here. Just on the edge there a little bit. There we go. And then maybe just a tiny little bit here. There we go. Sometimes it's really just playing around and kind of, you know, going with what makes your eye happy. Like I said, I'm kind of just getting those colors to kind of spread across here and create this design. If you wanted to stamp, you know, all the way down here and all the way over there, you could certainly do that, but I decided I wanted to kind of do a little bit more of a just a kind of a diagonal type pattern there. And let's grab the frayed burlap and have that sitting out here, but let's do this little filed image here. There we go. And lastly, I'm going to take this little identification stamp here and stamp some more with the black soot. And I'm just going to stamp that one kind of randomly here. There we go. And if you mess up and don't get a good stamp, again, like if you're brave, you can try lining it up again. This one's pretty small, so I'm not going to be brave. I'm just going to let it be what it is. It's imperfect, and that's okay. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of some splatters with this little splatter stamp. Splatter stamps are always a great option if you're scared of doing your own splatters. The stamp that does them for you takes all the scary away. A little more there. Let's finish up what's on my stamp. All right. Now we've got all of our stamping finished. And we're going to take the stencil that comes with this set. Obviously, if you don't have this set, I can't say this enough, maybe you've got the original stamp set that this is based off of. Grab that and play along, or any stamps that you might have. I did this originally. All these techniques are the same. I did this originally with Christmas stamps, and so if you've got Christmas stamps, take a look at that video if you didn't see it, and do some Christmas cards instead. So So now I'm just going to take a little bit of this old paper, and I'm just kind of applying the ink through the stencil in kind of the open space here. So you're just getting that. So we're not covering over that main image there. And then all you have to do is just slide that stencil down and line it back up with where you'd already stenciled. And I like to put that mint tape there just in case I don't accidentally put ink where I don't want it. And I probably did get a little bit, not too bad. I thought maybe I got more on his chin than I did, but not too bad. All right. So then, you can lift that up, take a peek. Perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping for. And then the last thing to do here, if you want, you can ink up the edges a little bit. So you take some of the frayed burlap and just ink the edges a little bit. If you want a kind of a brown, you could also do black if you wanted to really get a little more moody. And then, of course, you can always add some water splatters, which we do that a little bit here. So I'm just going to slowly pull the trigger. And I'm not holding it straight up and down. I'm holding it at a little bit of an angle here. And just dribble that along kind of the corners here a little bit. I'm not doing it over the center, just along the, kind of around the edges there. And then you can set that to the side to dry, or you can dry it with your heat tool. And then the last thing to do is just, add your sentiment. Kind of, ink the edges of that. And maybe pop it up with a little foam tape, just to add a little bit of interest to things. And then add a ribbon or a bow or some twine or something at the top. And again, you've got a tag ready to go. You could also use these like maybe if you do like junk journaling or art journaling, you could put these kind of tags in there if you really enjoy the process. I recently have been really loving the process of making tags just for the fun of the art of it, I guess, and the creative process. It's something the size is something I've been enjoying, I think. Again, cut off the top and put this on a card. Or you could just have done this exact techniques on a card size piece of paper. Or for this design, I don't know why, but when I started off with it, I was really struggling with color combinations and what to do with the images. And so I just started off with just stamping the images that I thought I wanted to play with and figuring out what the color combinations I wanted to use and what stamps I wanted to use. I really was going to try to limit this to just 2 stamp sets, and when I was forcing myself to do that, I was just not super happy with the finished look. But basically what I want to tell you is just, take the time to play. I did this myself and was like giving myself a hard time about it, and then I stopped to think, it was like, no, it's okay to just play. And are you wasting paper and ink? So what? That's part of the process. But like you can just see my different practicing, use the back sides, the front sides. If you've got some less expensive paper that you don't mind, wasting or whatever, play with that instead. And then when you get it figured out, grab your really good paper. You just want to make sure that the practice paper that you're working on acts similar-ish. Otherwise, you might be like, oh, it's not doing what I did on that paper, because different paper is going to impact how the inks react, especially if you're working with the oxide inks and water, like I'm going to be doing here. So anyway, give yourself permission to play. That's basically what this is. Kind of like I did earlier, I'm going to work in my stamp platform. And again, it's just when I'm working with a little bit larger image, the stamping platform just gives me a little more sense of security, I guess you'd say. So, and like I said, I really tried to only just do 2 stamp sets, but I just couldn't. So I'm again using several of the Tim Holtz mixed media stamp and stencil sets. So this is 171, this is 197, and this is 172. So again, if you don't have these exact sets, or if you have the original larger images, that is totally fine. I thought also too that maybe I would want to use this stencil and with this stamp set, but personally I've just felt like the scale of these was a little too large for my project. So then that's what led me to using this stamp and stencil set. So I did end up using this stencil and this stamp, and then we're also going to be using this stamp here. So this set, I'm only using this one image, so it's not necessary, but it was just a nice filler, so that's kind of why I went with it. And when I was trying to limit myself with what I was using, I was struggling. So if you want to do something, do it. Just do it. So all right, so we're going to start off on our tag again here, and I've got my little gentleman skeleton head, and going to just kind of play around a little bit. I'm going to stamp this bow tie with him too, and then I also want to think about where I want to put my sentiments. So for the sentiments on here, I'm going to be using these. He was spellbound, lost in the inky darkness. So I kind of want to just figure out where I would want to position those so that it feels like it's nice and centered. These are from the Tiny Text Halloween set, and I just stamped them with black soot oxide ink, and I want to use some of this same kind of paper here. And for this one, we're going to be doing some coloring of the image in with the little ink pads, and I can't say enough, these are just perfect for coloring in areas of a stamp. And it's not perfect in the sense of like you can have, total control, like if you were stamping an image that had layers to it, like there's some stamps out there that have layers that you use to create the final colored image. But for this kind of loosey-goosey stamping, we're kind of going for kind of a watercolory type effect. They're just, I don't know, I just really like them. And, just tip that down, kind of just get in the corner. You might have to kind of lean over a little bit to kind of see where you're putting the ink. And if you're getting like harsh lines, just kind of tap back over it again. And it doesn't have to be totally perfect. Remember that as well. Now I'm going to give this a mist, just a light mist, and stamp that over onto my paper here. And kind of like with that bigger skull. See, I didn't quite get as good of an image right there. Must have missed a little bit of ink. So I'll go back in here. Oh, wrong color. That is the hickory smoke. Remember, if you get some ink on there, on your ink pad that you can see, just tap it off onto like your craft mat or a paper towel. There we go. A little bit more here, I think. There we are. And then, if you want to give that another little spritz, you can. Perfect. If you want to, like this set comes with like glasses, you could stamp those. I'm just going to stamp his little bow tie here. And use a little dusty Concord for that. All right. from here, again, like if you want to use a stamping block, you can, or you can use a stamping platform. I kind of like to do the main image in my stamping platform, so I have a little bit more control of things. And then when it comes to the rest of it, I don't mind using a stamping block. So we're going to take our spider web image here, put that onto this block here, and take the hickory smoke and hook up my image. And because this is so delicate, I'm just going to barely mist it. I don't even know if you really need to mist it much. And then I'm going to stamp part of it here. And then kind of the other half up here. There we go. So if you don't have this set, maybe you've got some other kind of spider web image, you could stamp that instead. That would work. And then the rest of it I'm going to be doing with this set here. Stamp this up with some twisted citron, give it a little spritz, then stamp down there, and here. So kind of just basically use what was left on the stamp from where I didn't stamp it onto this paper here. And do this little toxic. We'll do that one with the Dusty Concord. That is spritz. And you know, we've got the purple here from his bow tie, so in kind of figuring out where I wanted to stamp this, I'm going to kind of think about spreading that color kind of at a diagonal here across the paper. And do one more here. Let's do this one with a little frayed burlap. Here we are. And then last but not least, if you want to add some splatters to this, you can. So you can go back and grab like the splatter stamp from this set, or any splatter stamp you have, or if you just want to like make your own splatters with a brush and some ink, you could do that too. Actually, why don't we do that instead of using another stamp set? So let's just make some splatters. So we can do, I don't want to get splatters on my main dude here, so I'm going to kind of, I'll just kind of mask him off a little bit-ish. This isn't perfect by any means, but that'll do. All right. You can also stamp him and cut him out if you wanted to, use that as a mask, but so I'm just gonna put a little bit of that dried marigold on my craft mat, give it a little spritz with some water, and then I've got this long brush. I have no idea, a friend of mine gave me this and I have no idea where she got it, where it came from, but it is my favorite. Just a nice long loose brush, and we'll just tap some splatters on there. You just pick it up and then just tap with your finger. And again, just kind of going with that diagonal. Now, if you get it some places that maybe you didn't want it, it's all good. It's all good. And then we can just set that to the side, let it dry, or you can kind of use your heat tool and speed up the drying of that. All right, that's dry. Let me just peel off our little mask we made there. And now we're ready to do some stenciling. I'm just gonna get my sticky mat down here again, and we're gonna grab this stencil, and I'm gonna start off with this kind of the arches design. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I really love how they kind of selected stencils that are so perfect for repeat images. So you can easily slide this down and repeat this across the or down your paper. So get a little bit here. Oops, forgot to put a mask. Do that carefully. All right. And then we can just peel that up and slide that down. Line it up. And move our mint tape up here to mask off that text area, because I don't want to get any ink into that just yet. And again, I'm just barely getting ink on here. I'm just kind of very lightly rubbing this on. If you start to put it on and it just seems it's a lot darker than you want, wipe some of it off onto your craft mat before you put it onto your paper even. And now, so there we are. So like if you've got some areas where you're like, oh, I'd like a little bit more there, just put your stencil back in there and fix it. Easy enough. There we go. And same thing down here. There we are. And then now I'm going to take our text and add some of that to the background, kind of for a second layer. And I'm going to use that same color, Twisted Citron. I've got like a little smaller blending brush here so that I can really get down into that stencil. Nice. When it comes to blending tools, I find that having a variety of them on hand is helpful, because depending on what you're doing, what kind of ink you're working with, what kind of stencil you're working with, it can impact what sort of brush you might want to use. So, you know, some stencils have really small details, and I find the ones that have, you know, more of a bristle brush to them really help you get into the detail of the stencil and give you more design. So I want to get this a little darker, so you can kind of go over this as much as you like or as little as you like. I just want it to really contrast with what we did on that first layer. Get a little bit more here. Some here. There we go. And then I'm just gonna slide this down and just make sure I get it down below so there's like a little space between the final letters and this one, so it looks intentional as a continuous amount of text. And just, yeah, continue adding the ink. And again, we're not doing the ink over the main image. You might notice too, I'm not always like dabbing because that doesn't really pick up much ink. If you kind of work it in a little bit of a circle, that really will pick up a lot of ink. And then, you know, you can peel that up and see if there's some areas you want to add some. I want to put some here. There we go. Perfect. Oh, love it, love it, love it. Okay. So there is a look at that. Now, if you want to, like with all of these, you want to keep adding to this, you could take your brush and maybe add a little more ink onto it and pull that around the edges of your tag. If you want to do something with some contrast, you could, you know, take a brown or black or green or gray. And you can see I'm just kind of pulling that ink. I'm starting off with the craft mat and pulling it onto the edge there. And it just kind of gives it a little soft, muted edge. But like I said, if you wanted to give this a little bit more definition, you know, maybe you take some of the frayed burlap and ink along here using maybe a foam brush, and then it gives you a little bit more of a smaller edging. It kind of layers over that green that we just did and makes it just a little bit more distressed. If you want more brown, add more brown. Just kind of circle it around here. Use a little bit what's left on your blending tool there. And then from here, if you want to add some splatters, you can. So I'm just going to do a little bit of that kind of along the corners here, not going over the center, just pulling slow with that trigger and creating those splatters. And then you can just let this dry or dry it with your heat tool, whichever you prefer. All right, and then the last thing to do here is just add your sentiment strips, or not. If you don't want to use, you know, if you don't want to add any sentiments, you don't have to. You know, leave it like it is. And you're ready to go. Add a little ribbon or twine to the top of it. And yeah, it's perfect. And like I've said before, junk journals, tags, cards, whatever you want to use this for, gift bags. I also wanted to show you just kind of a mini size one that I made. So this is just on one of the smaller tags. And I stamped and did the exact same techniques with the stamps and stencils, and just did it on a little smaller canvas. So just shows you how you could do it on different size things. You could do this same thing on a regular card front, and yeah, good to go. I hope this video sparked some spooky inspiration for using the Mini Distress Oxide ink pads and got you excited for Halloween crafting. Let me know in the comments which tag was your favorite, if you're trying out the new colors, or how you plan to use your minis this season. You'll find links to all of the products I used in the description box below, along with a visual supply list for a quick look at everything. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe for more crafty inspiration, tips, and techniques. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay crafty, my friend.